I arrived at my son's house with hope, assuming that perhaps, just perhaps, I would find a little bit of the affection I had long missed. 2 years had passed since my husband died that winter, and the silence in my house was so loud I could hear the wall clock tick like a metronome in an empty hall. The living room always felt like a theater after the curtain had fallen. Still, empty, lifeless. Most days, I just sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly as the clock chimed every lonely second. "Mom, are we really worried about you living alone?" Zachary asked me on the phone. His voice warm and sincere. "Why don't you come live with us? It's livelier here, and you could help us with Leo too." My heart felt lighter. Seeing my son every day, spending time with my grandson, it all sounded like the medicine my soul needed. I packed a few clothes, locked up my house, and tucked away a document I hadn't touched in years, the house deed, well hidden in the back of my dressing table. Then, I set off into their world. They lived in the Upper West Side of New York City, an area of tree-lined streets, students, and parks that smelled of new money. As soon as I stepped through the door, I was dazzled by everything inside. Crystal lamps, a plush leather sofa, and strange, expensive-looking paintings on the walls, though I didn't quite understand them. The marble floor gleamed like a mirror. It was clear they hadn't spared any expense. Brittany, with a half-applied face mask, greeted me with a very forced smile. She moved cautiously, as if afraid the mask would fall off if she moved too much. "Paige, how lovely that you're finally here. Come in, it's hot outside," she said in a shrill voice. She reached out to take my rolling suitcase, which wasn't even that heavy, but immediately dropped it as if she'd touched something sticky. Then, as if nothing had happened, she produced a pair of new slippers. "Zachary isn't here yet, but I've already ordered your favorite food for dinner. He'll be right along," she said, glancing at me briefly. She saw my gray hair, my warm shoes, and my old suitcase. Her smile faltered for a second. I felt a flicker of something unsettling, but I just smiled and quietly said, "Thank you, Brittany, that's very kind of you." Zachary arrived punctually for dinner, and it was clear he was happy to see me. He moved around the table with great energy, as if he were the host of a party. The food was very well prepared, with several dishes that surely took time and effort. Brittany sat across from me, feeding Leo, when she suddenly said, as if nothing happened, "You know, everything's so expensive lately. The last time I was at the grocery store, I spent over $1,200, and Leo's school is extremely pricey. Plus, the mortgage is crushing us." "It's an enormous pressure," Brittany sighed, casting a sidelong glance at me. Zachary quickly intervened. "Hey, it's dinner time. Let's not start with that. Mom just got here. Don't scare her."
Brittany shrugged and said nothing more.
But that phrase, "it's an enormous pressure," hung in the air like smoke. It hurt me. It wasn't direct, but it pricked me. At that moment, I paid it no mind. I thought, young people complain about everything. Who isn't stressed these days? But now, reflecting on it calmly, I realize it was like a warning, a silent rehearsal of what she really wanted to say. I thought I was coming to a house full of love, to something beautiful and sincere, a story of grandmothers and grandsons. But just one single night was enough to change everything. It all began with the question of who would pay for what. The next morning, I woke up early as always. With age, one hardly sleeps deeply anymore. I thought of making them a warm breakfast to surprise them. I tiptoed into the kitchen and found Brittany already awake. She sat at the table in a silk robe, one leg crossed over the other, calmly painting her nails while an audiobook played on her phone. On the table were still takeout bags from the night before, with greasy wrappers. When I entered, she barely looked up. She glanced at me without much interest and said, "Oh, Paige, you're already up." As if she was just checking another item off her list. "I've already ordered breakfast. Don't worry,"
he said silently opposite her.
The atmosphere was tense, strange. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the greasy smell of the food, as if the air itself was reminding me that I didn't belong. Then the order arrived. Donuts, eggs, sandwiches, and lattes. All in paper cups and bags. Zachary ate a bit, threw his briefcase over his shoulder, and waved goodbye to me as he headed out. "See you at dinner, Mom." The door closed loudly behind him. Brittany, little Leo, who was playing quietly on the rug, and I remained. Brittany put down her fork, wiped her lips with a napkin, and finally looked at me. She smiled at me, but it was a smile like a real estate agent's. "Paige," she said in a quiet voice. "Now that you're living with us, you know there are more people, right? And that means more expenses. Leo's school costs a fortune, and since we both work, it all adds up." She paused for a moment, as if carefully weighing her words. Then she smiled again. Now a bit friendlier, but still with that tone as if we were discussing business. "So," I thought, "could you help us with about $3,500 a month? It's not much, just something to balance things out. That way we clarify things from the start to avoid misunderstandings later." She said it so calmly, as if announcing the building's electricity would be shut off tomorrow. My hand trembled, and I nearly spilled hot coffee on my lap. I was completely surprised, and then a shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't about the money. I could easily pay it with my pension and my husband's savings. It was enough for me to live alone. What hurt me was the way she said it, that look on her cold, calculating face, without the slightest doubt or shame, as if she were collecting a debt from me. Just yesterday, she was full of smiles, very friendly, and now she was presenting me with the bill for sitting at her table. I stared at her intently, hoping to see something on her face. I don't know, a laugh, a sign that it was a joke, or that she was at least embarrassed, but no, her face was calm, as if she had every right. To her, I wasn't part of the family. I was just another expense, another line on her payment ledger. I had come from Albany, New York, with the idea of staying a while, to laugh a bit, to help with Leo. But apparently, I was just another tenant. Someone who had to pay rent. I felt my heart being crushed. I didn't answer. I just sat there with two voices arguing in my head. One voice told me, "Let it go, Paige.
Jure notjang animore.
Zachary is your only son. If it helps him, give him the money. Do it for peace's sake, as you always have." But the other, stronger voice said, "You've given enough. You raised him alone, helped him buy his house, set him up in life, and now when all you want is to be near them, they ask you to pay as if you're a stranger." It wasn't about the money, it was about respect. Today it's $3,500, and next month, what else will they demand from you? It wasn't about the dollars, it was about my dignity. From the beginning, Brittany never saw me as part of this family. She saw me as someone passing through, a visitor who had to play along, follow the rules, and then leave on time. Every word she said, every glance from her, silently reminded me, "You don't belong here, you're a stranger and nothing more." And, involuntarily, my mind drifted back a few years. It was when Zachary and Brittany had just gotten engaged. Fresh out of college, they were just starting out and had many money problems. Buying a house was impossible. They couldn't even raise the down payment. Zachary was so desperate he couldn't sleep. I remember his calls in the night, his voice full of stress and worry. My husband, who was still alive then, and I sat in the kitchen that evening. We spent hours checking our accounts, late into the night. That morning, we had already made the decision. My husband and I used almost all our savings. We even used part of his retirement money. We collected everything we could and paid for this apartment in full, without a single dollar of debt. The deed remained in my name. Of course, we never told them the whole truth. We just told them we had made the down payment, and they would pay the rest with a mortgage. So, every month they sent me money for the loan on time, but I never used it. I kept it in a separate account in case they really needed it, or if my husband and I could no longer support ourselves. Only he and I knew the truth. Zachary and Brittany always believed they were slowly paying off the house, that it was theirs. I laughed bitterly. "Brittany, do you really think I'm just a visitor here? You have no idea that I paid for all of this." I couldn't stay silent any longer. I've always thought a good home is based on respect. But if you've decided to treat me like a stranger, then don't be surprised if I stop pretending this is family and treat it like a business. I took a deep breath. I felt the cold in my chest give way, replaced by a firm calm, as when a decision has been made. I looked up and met Brittany's eyes. She was still looking at me, expecting me to back down. She smiled, yes, but her eyes said something else, as if she already felt like a victor. I spoke slowly and calmly. $3,500? Sure, no problem. She hadn't expected it. Her eyes widened, and she smiled as if she'd just found a designer handbag at 50% off. She must have thought I was scared, afraid of growing old alone, or being homeless. I didn't even bother to tell her how wrong she was. I slowly stood up, turned, and went back to my room. It was the smallest in the apartment, with just the bare necessities, a bed and an old wardrobe. My suitcase was still almost unpacked in the corner. I had only taken out a few clothes. I knelt and picked it up. The leather was already worn, and the tag from my last trip still hung on the handle. I reached into the side pocket and pulled out a small key. The lock clicked softly. Inside were no jewels or money, just small pieces of a simple life. A photo of my husband when he was young. There were a few letters I had written to myself but never sent. There were also old faded clothes that hadn't seen the light of day in years. Everything was still there, as if it wasn't welcome in this house either. At the very bottom, I found a small red velvet pouch. I ran my fingers over the soft fabric and carefully pulled it out. I loosened the string, and there was a thick, burgundy folder. On the first page, in firm script, was my name, Paige Dawson. I held it in my hands for a while, feeling its weight. Then I left my room and went back to the dining room. Brittany was still sitting there with that triumphant smile, as if she were an executive who had just closed a big deal and was just waiting for the papers to be signed. I walked to the table, but didn't sit down. Instead, I placed the red folder with a dry thud right in the middle. Thump. As soon as she saw it, her smile froze. Before she could say anything about the $3,500 a month, I spoke calmly, a calm that surprised even me. Really, maybe we should talk about the rent first. I touched the folder with a finger and continued quietly but firmly. I paid for this apartment.
The name on the deed is Paige Dawson. Mine.
I paused, watching the color drain from her face. You and Zachary moved in, what, 3 or 4 years ago? You know how high the rent is here. Let's calculate how much rent you owe, and then if you want, we can talk about household expenses. She stared at me speechless. I continued. Household expenses. Perfect. We'll make it very clear. You live in my house. I eat your donuts. We'll pay for everything account by account. I felt the air leave the room. Brittany's confident expression vanished like paint bleeding into water. Her eyes widened. She stared at the folder as if it were a summons with her name on it, then grabbed it abruptly and began flipping through it with trembling hands. When she got to the first page and clearly saw Paige Dawson, along with my full social security number, her face went white. First it was surprise, then anger, then fear. She looked up at me as if I were someone she didn't know. The woman she thought was weak, quiet, perhaps even needy, turned out to be the rightful owner of the place where she lived. Everything went silent. Outside, the faint honking of a car driving down the street could be heard, and the wall clock ticked, breaking the silence like a hammer. I said nothing, just took my plate of cold oatmeal, stirred it with my spoon, and brought a spoonful to my mouth. And yes, I admit it. Seeing her like that, as if she'd swallowed a live fly, gave me a small feeling of joy, though it was very brief. But I also knew that this was just the beginning. The real trouble hadn't even started yet. Brittany opened her mouth as if to say something, but nothing came out. Her jaw moved, her mouth trembled as if she wanted to utter words, but perhaps pride or reason held her back. She bit her lip, swallowing all the anger she held within. Suddenly, with poorly concealed fury, she grabbed the folder and hurled it back onto the table. It crashed loudly on the wood, breaking the silence. Even Leo, startled, dropped his toy, and looked at us with wide eyes. Brittany pushed her chair so hard it squeaked across the floor. She gave me a look full of rage, teeth clenched, and without a word, disappeared into her room, slamming the door as if her crown had fallen off. I didn't move. The red folder still lay on the table, glowing brightly on the wood like an open wound. In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. Since I had placed that deed on the table, the atmosphere in the house had changed. It was as if a layer of ice had settled over the house. Brittany froze, no longer speaking to me. She didn't even look at me. If we met in the hallway, she walked past me as if I wasn't there, as if I were invisible. The kitchen, once the heart of the house, became purely decorative. Brittany no longer cooked. She ordered food or took Leo to her mother's for dinner. She never said anything when she left, just gathered her things and went without looking back. It seemed as if I no longer existed, as if I were just a nuisance they could barely tolerate. Even the living room felt different. It used to echo with Leo's laughter or Brittany's TV shows. There was noise, life. Now, it was pure silence. Just Leo and I, sitting on the rug, putting together a puzzle. Click-clack, loose pieces that sounded like this broken family, on the verge of falling apart. Zachary was hit the hardest. He came home from work, and you could tell how he was doing just by his face, tense, tired, bewildered. It became clear to me that Brittany had already told him everything, surely in her own way, with drama and tears. But Zachary never said anything directly to me. He just waited until Brittany went to shower or stepped out to make a phone call, then crept into the kitchen like he was sneaking into his own house. "Mom," he began in a quiet, ashamed voice, rubbing his hands without looking up from the floor. "Sometimes Brittany is a bit harsh, but she doesn't mean anything by it. That's just her way. You know, she talks without thinking." I looked at my son, this man who would do anything to maintain peace, but never truly pleased anyone. And then I felt my heart fill with sadness and anger. I interrupted him gently, but every word was clear. "Zachary, I know this is hard for you, but it has nothing to do with money, it has to do with respect." I looked him straight in the eyes and said firmly, "Your father and I saved for years to buy this house. I'm sorry I didn't tell you the deed was in my name. I always thought I'd give it to you someday, but the way your wife treats me has made me doubt everything. How does she see me? As a burden? Someone who has to pay to stay, a stranger who has to buy her place at the table?" I paused, lowering my voice, but now with a colder tone. "I'm not demanding rent, I'll let that go for now. But as for household expenses, don't ever mention them again. I have no problem helping, of course not, but not when it's demanded like a bill. Not when there's not even a shred of respect behind it. If I'm not treated with a minimum of dignity, why should I stay?" Zachary opened his mouth as if to say something, but closed it again. Finally, he lowered his head and mumbled, "I understand, Mom. I'll talk to her." I looked at him and sighed softly. I thought my words would calm Brittany, but no. The only thing they did was make her more creative. She stopped asking me for money directly and began her silent war. It was as if she were running her own campaign. Small things, things that looked like accidents, but weren't. One day, I entered the bathroom after she had used it. The entire floor was drenched. The tiles were wet, slippery, as if she had poured oil on them. I almost fell. Another time, I put laundry in the machine. When I turned around, the washing machine was already full to the brim. She had set it to the longest cycle, the deep disinfection, 2 hours. I quietly watched TV in the living room. If I walked past, she'd grab the remote, turn the volume so high the windows vibrated, and disappear into her room, slamming the door. Small, but very annoying things. Did I feel anger? Of course, but I didn't show it. Slippery bathroom? I waited until it was dry or grabbed the mop and wiped it. Washing machine occupied? I took my clothes to the dry cleaner, which was possible. I washed them by hand. TV at full volume? I turned the TV off, went to my room, read a book, or put on my headphones and listened to a podcast. She wanted me to snap, to get angry, to explode, to feel so bad that I'd pack my bags and leave. But no, I'm made of stronger stuff. I spent my youth working night shifts at the hospital. I dealt with overtired nurses, impatient patients, and systems that failed day after day. Do you really think your passive-aggressive games will get to me? Brittany, my dear, you picked a fight with the wrong person. I've always been one to fight fire with fire. I wouldn't let Brittany ruin the whole house. At least, not overtly. For Zachary, for my son, I tried to stay calm. I thought if I didn't react, things would calm down on their own. But the more silent I was, the more Brittany thought I was weak. Brittany continued with her games, small but irritating things that made the house grow colder. And when she saw that I said nothing, she grew nervous, even anxious. One night, I got up to go to the bathroom. As I passed their room, I saw the door ajar, barely a crack, but enough. The light inside was dim, but her voice was clearly audible, cutting through the silence like a knife. "She's doing this on purpose," she said. "She's so arrogant with that paper in her hand, as if she's the queen of this house. She thinks she can control us with it. She's crazy, Zachary. I'm warning you, if you keep defending her, I can't live like this." Then I heard Zachary's tired, quiet voice. "Keep it down, Mom's room is next door." Brittany laughed dryly. "And what if she hears me? Better if she hears me." If she had an ounce of shame, she'd have gone back to her dusty little apartment in Albany already. I stood still. The cold crept from my bare feet up to my neck, but I didn't move an inch. "I've seen worse than you, Brittany. This doesn't scare me. When I worked at the hospital, that was a war zone. Double shifts, gossip, bosses with hidden daggers behind their smiles, and I survived it all. If you'd tried this with one of my old nurses, you'd have been serving coffee before you even finished the sentence. But doing it to your mother-in-law, that's truly thoughtless." Since her silent war wasn't working, Brittany brought in reinforcements. That weekend, she invited her mother, Brooke Peterson. A very refined lady, one of those who surely practice their smiles in front of the mirror. Allegedly, she was just passing through, hadn't been here in a long time. But Brittany's face said otherwise. This was a sneaky plan, and Brooke came prepared, a few years younger than me, well-dressed, perfect makeup, expensive perfume. Everything about her seemed straight out of a magazine. As soon as she came in, she took my hands with those polished nails, as if she'd applied 3 layers of gloss.
"Peige, Ivy been doing to meet you."
"I heard you moved in, and I told Brittany, how have I not visited yet?" Really, I felt terrible. I smiled politely but said nothing. She led me to the sofa and sat beside me. Her eyes sparkled. "You look spectacular. Not a day older than. What's your secret? You must tell me your routine." All honey, until she delivered the blow, so without warning, like someone changing the subject with the wind. "But Paige," she said, patting my hand with that delicate, practiced manner of older adults. "Sometimes you have to make room in your heart to understand the younger ones. They're going through tough times too. You know how it is these days," Brooke said very calmly. "Young people have to juggle everything, raising kids, paying the mortgage, and working hard at their jobs. Zachary and Brittany are under a lot of pressure." I just nodded silently. She continued speaking calmly, circling around the real reason she had come. "I heard you took out the deed recently," she said, as if it were no big deal, but her eyes never left mine. "The truth," she continued, "I think in a family, things shouldn't be so formal. A deed kept in a drawer isn't worth much, don't you think? But if it causes tension, the young couple feels like the house isn't truly theirs." And then came the question, disguised as friendliness, but hard as stone internally. "So, perhaps you thought it would be better to just hand over the deed to them? That way they're free of their worries. Everyone is calm, and the house feels like their true home, and we can all continue as a happy family. What do you say?" I couldn't help it. A small smile escaped me. "Ah, sure, this is the next move, the same game, just with a different player." Brittany demanded monthly payments. Brooke came for the whole house. One was direct, the other feigned diplomacy. The same hunger, just with a different fork. I kept the smile on my face and the gentle tone, but my answer was firm. "Brooke, I understand what you're telling me," I replied, carefully using her own words. "But transferring the deed is not something I'm considering at the moment." I paused. I saw that slight shift in her eyes, how her smile tightened a fraction, how her expression changed, even though she tried to maintain the same friendly tone. "You mentioned that young people need security, and I agree. But I believe that security in a family doesn't come from papers. It comes from mutual respect and the knowledge that one is treated with dignity. Don't you agree?" I returned the volley. Gently but clearly. Every beautiful sentence she had planned crumbled. Her friendly mother-in-law smile disappeared as if a switch had been flipped. And when Brittany saw that her mother couldn't convince me, She jumped up and added fuel to the fire. Mom, don't waste any more time. She's doing this on purpose. She has this deed like a weapon against us. She makes us feel like parasites just because we live in her house. She plays the martyr, as if she's providing for us out of pity. Who does that to their own child?
Brokes face shanget.
She looked offended, and her voice grew louder. Exactly, Paige. That's just cruel. Zachary is your son, and yet you let them go through this. If people find out, they'll say Brittany married you for the property, and that Zachary is a freeloading leech living off his mother. And just like that, the living room exploded. Zachary stood between the three of us, pale as a sheet and sweating. He looked like a firefighter thrown into 3 fires at once, spinning around frantically, trying to put out the flames with his bare hands. Mom, can't we not do this? Please, just this once. Brittany, calm down. Brooke, stop it, please. No one is attacking anyone. Zachary moved from one side to the other, trying to calm everyone with gentle words, as if that would be enough. But those words did no good. They didn't touch the fire, let alone extinguish it. And as the screams grew louder, I noticed it. Zachary was breaking down. His eyes changed as he looked at me. He seemed softer, yes, but not in a good way. It was that look of someone who just wants all the noise to stop. As if he wanted to say, can we just make this go away? That same evening, when Brittany took Leo to bathe, Zachary crept quietly into my room like a shadow. His voice was barely a whisper and trembling. Mom, I know you're hurt, and I understand that, but maybe we could just leave the house thing for now. He forced a smile. It wasn't a smile of joy, but rather a disguised apology. I just want peace, Mom. Brittany doesn't mean to hurt anyone. She just wants this house to feel like her home. That's all. And then I was hit by that familiar feeling, that old silent disappointment that slowly crushes you. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was that emptiness that takes your breath away, saps your strength. Because I realized that Zachary didn't not understand what was happening. He understood, but he didn't have the courage to do anything about it. He saw everything, the lack of respect, the manipulations, how his wife talked to me and about me, and yet he chose to look away. He wanted to maintain peace, even if it meant sacrificing his mother's dignity, just to avoid another argument. I interrupted him. My voice was quiet, but firm, already weary. Zachary, I'm only going to tell you this one more time. I am not using this house to control anyone. I looked him straight in the eyes. Your father and I bought this house with years of hard work. It was always for you, for your future. Not so your wife could use it as a weapon against me. My voice remained calm, but each word fell like a stone. And if you truly believe that it doesn't matter that your wife asks me directly for money and then says behind my back that I'm a useless old woman, if you're willing to justify all of that, then I'm leaving. I dropped those words as if dropping a match in the middle of the room and turned around. I went back to my room. I closed the door softly behind me, but inside, I felt as if something within me had completely emptied out. Zachary remained in the living room, pale, with bloodless lips. Perhaps he finally realized I was serious, that I could really leave, but if my words moved him, they only strengthened Brittany. She must have thought I was just bluffing, that I'd talk big for a few days and then give up like a tired old woman who ultimately has nowhere to go. Because to her, what could an almost 70-year-old widow do? Without work, without a plan B, without another home, without her house. Where would she go? The message she didn't speak aloud, but made very clear, was, if you leave, you'll die. And from that moment on, everything got worse. Every afternoon, my naps were interrupted by the TV at full volume. She always put on a loud program, whose voices sounded like fingernails on a chalkboard, or she'd turn on the vacuum cleaner and run it back and forth in front of my room, as if she were scraping the floor with a lawnmower. The noise was not only annoying but intentionally amplified. And then Brooke moved in, the mother-in-law who became a guest. After her failed attempt at friendly intervention, she decided to stay a while. Let's be honest, she wasn't visiting. She was there to wage psychological warfare, a team effort with her daughter. They turned the whole house into their theater. Meals became a show. They criticized my cooking as if they were restaurant critics in their worst hell phase, sometimes too bland, sometimes too salty, sometimes too old-fashioned. At the table, they spoke quickly at a volume that wasn't shouting, but so I couldn't follow a single word. And they also made sure I wasn't invited to speak. They wanted to erase me without touching me, make me invisible simply by excluding me. But I remained silent, more silent than ever. When they spoke, I closed my door. When they rolled their eyes, I quietly continued eating. They hurled comments like weapons, and I responded with silence, because silence, used correctly, hurts more than anything else. By this time, I had stopped expecting Zachary to intervene. He had already made his decision. He stood on the side of the marriage, even if it meant abandoning his mother. I pondered what to do, when life gave me an answer in the bitterest way. It was a hot afternoon, one of those that makes you tired. The sun dripped like honey, and I sat on the balcony, gently rocking in my chair with headphones on. I was listening to a podcast. My eyes were already closing, I was half asleep. Suddenly I heard her. A shrill, familiar voice. The glass door to their bedroom wasn't fully closed, and our balconies almost touched. Brittany was speaking to Brooke in a quiet, but clearly venomous tone. "Don't worry, Mom. That old bat won't last much longer. She's just pretending to be tough. Where else is she going to go? Zachary is all she has." She thought no one could hear her. "She'll give up eventually. She's waving that thing around as if it matters. Just wait, one day she'll die. And guess what? The house goes straight to Zachary. It's the same as mine. Her pension doesn't even cover her groceries. Do you think she's going to buy another place at her age? Just wait, she'll come crawling back, and when that happens, I'll be making the decisions." I sat up with a jolt. My headphones fell off. I felt my palms wet and cold, as if I were touching an iron railing in the middle of a snowstorm. She wasn't looking for peace. She wasn't trying to reach an agreement. She was waiting for me to die. She had already planned for my pension, my house, and even my husband's savings to be part of her future. She was counting the days until my absence, saying everything with a calm that seemed purely logistical. But every word she said was like a scalpel, cutting me to the bone. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. Brittany never saw me as part of the family, not once. I wasn't her mother-in-law. I wasn't a person. I was an obstacle, something to be endured, a temporary problem. It wasn't ignorance or a lack of emotional maturity. It was pure greed and cruelty. Everything was calculated, cold, and evil. She wasn't stupid, she was malicious. Very well, Brittany, Brooke, and the coward Zachary. If you've chosen cruelty, then don't be surprised if I stop being kind. When I heard Brittany's words, with that mix of venom, greed, and contempt, every emotional bond one had to this house, to this alleged family, shattered forever. It wasn't sadness, it was disgust, a deep revulsion at their world. Family is just a transaction. If you're no longer useful, you're disposable. Once the utility ends, so should the relationship. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't endure it any longer. I didn't have to think about it for long. The next morning was Saturday. Zachary and Brittany were home as usual, and Brooke was still clinging to them like a fungus. I woke up early as always, but this time I didn't stay in my room. I put on clean clothes, a sun hat, took my bag, and walked out the door. I went to the farmer's market, bought fresh meat, some vegetables, and ripe tomatoes. On the way back, I stopped at my favorite bakery and bought 4 blueberry cream tarts. My little indulgence. When I got home, I went straight to the kitchen without many words, without comments. Only the rhythm of the stove, which hadn't had so much work in days. By late afternoon, the house was filled with the smell of home-cooked food. Brittany and her mother looked up from the sofa in surprise. They had eaten only takeout and reheated pizza for days. They hadn't even bothered to use a spatula. Zachary's face brightened. He thought this was some kind of peace gesture. He ran into the kitchen to help carry the plates, as if he were happy. "Mom, this smells incredible. Thanks for cooking," he said, as if a band-aid could mend a broken leg. There was silence at the table, a strange silence, the kind of silence that's tense, as if something was about to explode. Brooke chewed slowly, looking at me every few seconds. Brittany kept her head down, but the way she held her fork said it all. She was waiting for me to do something. Zachary tried to lighten the mood by telling a few stories from the office, like a child trying to win the Student of the Month award. He even elicited a few laughs, but no one participated. I just sat before them, watching. The food was good, but internally, I felt nothing, because I knew this would be the last time I would cook for this house. I looked at Zachary, my son. In front of him sat two women whose faces were full of greed. If he could see the calculation behind their smiles now, perhaps, just perhaps, he would doubt, but he didn't. He just kept his head down, chewed slowly, and looked at everyone as if waiting for something to explode. Some people only understand boundaries when they are set. And I did. When dinner was over, I put down my cutlery and wiped my mouth with a napkin. The room fell silent. The TV continued in the background, but it no longer mattered. I sat up straight and looked each of them in the eye. Zachary, Brittany, and Brooke. And then I spoke. I have made my decision. On Monday, I will visit my attorney to formally revoke your right of occupancy in this house. My gaze focused on Zachary. I bought this property with my money. It was never a gift, nor was it added to any joint assets. Brittany's face changed. What are you talking about? What am I talking about? I repeated with a calm smile, that you and your mother are moving out. Brooke was speechless. Paige, are you crazy? Are you kicking us out? What happened to family? Family. I repeated. My voice was now cold and calm. Was that before or after you vacuumed outside my door at midnight, or perhaps when you waited outside my room for me to die? Zachary's face went pale. Mom, please don't do this. Can't we just talk? I turned to him with more coldness than ever. Zachary, I gave you many opportunities to talk. I asked for understanding. I gave you my silence. I gave you peace. You had it. And now you have to bear the consequences along with them. I stood up calmly and composed, and pulled a carefully folded paper from my bag. This is an advance notice, I said, showing the paper. You have 3 days to remove everything that doesn't belong to me from this house. I won't call the police, but if you're still here after that, I will instruct my attorney to issue a formal eviction notice. Brittany jumped up. You can't do that, she screamed. Zachary, tell her. Zachary didn't move, didn't say a word, just stood there blankly, as if someone had drained all his energy. I turned and walked into the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water. My voice sounded calm, unperturbed, and natural. I'm not bluffing. I can sell this house, rent it out, donate it to a homeless shelter, whatever, but I won't leave it to people who treat me with contempt. I turned around and looked at them one last time. I can be a good mother, I said with a firm voice. Or I can be the owner of this house. The choice is theirs. Then I turned and went back to my room. The door closed with a decisive click behind me, and then the house exploded. Brittany screamed from the living room, banging on plates and the table like a child in a tantrum. See how she treats us? She's trying to ruin us. She's throwing us out like trash. Who is she? Or does she think she's Brooke? Brooke didn't hold back, adding fuel to the fire. Zachary, are you blind? This house should have been yours. What right does she have to do this? And then Zachary finally lost his composure. Enough, he yelled. His voice cut through the chaos like a whip. Can you both shut up for 5 minutes? The silence broke abruptly. He sank into a chair, buried his face in his hands, and when he finally spoke, his voice was weak. This house was never mine. She paid for it completely. My name isn't on the deed. Never was. He lowered his hands, revealing a face full of shame. What am I supposed to do? Brittany remained motionless. Brooke also stood still, surprised, and in my room, I felt nothing. The show was over. It was time to dismantle the set. That evening, I sat down at my desk and gathered my documents, a copy of the house deed, the revocation of occupancy rights, my attorney's contact sheet, and a listing for nearby rental apartments that my friend Kelsey had given me, who was always by my side. I already had a plan. Once they were gone, I would rent out this house and finally detach myself from all this toxicity. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Clean clothes, a dark blazer, my hair neatly tied back under a hat. I took my leather portfolio and went into the living room. Brittany and Brooke lay on the sofa, pale as if they hadn't slept all night. I stood before them and said calmly, "I'm going to my attorney's office to file the official paperwork. You have 3 days. Leave before the deadline, and I won't pursue the matter further. Stay, and we'll settle it in court." Brittany looked up. Her face was pale. "Are you really doing this?" "I'm not kicking anyone out," I replied seriously. "I'm just settling outstanding matters. This was never your house. Never was." Brooke jumped up.
How can you be so heartless? Zachary is your son.
"Aren't you ashamed?" I didn't even look at her. I turned to Zachary. "If you were truly my son," I said, looking him in the eyes, "you would know that this is the last time your mother cleans up your mess." Zachary opened his mouth, but said nothing.
I let out a der Y, silent laug. Relax, I won't put you on the street.
I held up the file. "I've already spoken with the property management. There are some apartments available for rent in less than a week. You'll have a roof over your head. Don't say I didn't give you a soft landing." And with that, I left. I went straight to the office of Camille Miller in Midtown, New York. She was exactly the kind of woman I wanted on my side. She was about 40, sharp as broken glass. She wore stilettos and specialized in family real estate and high-conflict situations. Kelsey had introduced us months ago, just in case. I sat opposite her, unfolded my papers on the desk, and began to speak without hesitation. "I don't want my money back. I just want them to leave." I looked her straight in the eyes. "I want my space back. I want my life back. And I want this whole twisted, parasitic relationship ended once and for all." Camille quickly scanned the documents, then nodded confidently. "Your ownership is clear, the evidence is solid. The occupancy agreement isn't legally binding. From a legal standpoint, Paige, you don't even owe them an explanation. It's your house, and you have every right to reclaim it." She paused and looked at me seriously. "Are you sure you're ready?" I nodded. "Yes, I am." After leaving her office, I stopped at a small coffee shop on the corner. I ordered a coffee. I sat by the window for about 10 minutes, breathing for the first time in years. This is what space felt like. My space, my life, my rules.
When I got home, I said nothing.
That afternoon, I called property management to arrange a move-out inspection. I booked a moving company. Everything was ready. That night, I told Zachary calmly and practically, "You have 48 hours." He didn't answer, just let out a long sigh. From the other room, I heard Brittany angrily slamming drawers. Brooke packed her bags, muttering quiet curses. I ignored them. Finally, on the third morning, the movers arrived. They loaded their boxes and bags into the truck. Brittany turned at the door, her face full of rage. "You'll regret this," she said furiously. I smiled calmly and firmly. "No, I only regret letting it go on for so long." The door closed loudly behind them. Silence came like snow. I carried my old leather suitcase onto the balcony. The sunlight fell on my hands. I picked up my phone and called Kelsey. "I'm ready to take the studio apartment." "Are you sure you want that one?" she said teasingly. "It's not near the subway, and it doesn't have a dishwasher. If no one's vacuuming outside my room, I'll survive perfectly." That afternoon, I signed the lease and paid the deposit. On the day I moved, I listed the house for rent. The rental payments would go directly into my pension account. No shared keys, no shared air. I connected to the internet and ordered new bed linens, new curtains, and an antique record player I had always liked. 3 days later, I moved into my small apartment. It wasn't large, hardly 320 square feet, a bedroom, a bathroom, a modest kitchen, and a living room. But the windows faced south, and in the evening, sunlight streamed across the entire wall. I spent the whole afternoon unpacking and setting up. Cream-colored curtains, my favorite light green sheets, and that retro record player, now sitting on the coffee table beside a small bouquet of daisies. I didn't ask anyone for help. I took my time, one box, one towel, one drawer at a time, as if cleansing every last bit of resentment, fatigue, and pain. That evening, I made a cup of tea and sat in the rocking chair by the window. The record player spun, and Sam Cooke's "A Change Is Gonna Come" filled the room. The sound warm and deep, like an anthem to the new. I glanced at my phone. A message from the real estate agent appeared on the screen. "Mrs. Dawson, your property is already rented. The first payment has been made. Please confirm." I smiled. I once thought this house was where all the love I had given as a mother was. Now I know that what was mine was never this house, never the bricks, never the property title, and certainly never the son who used the word family to hide his entitlements. What is mine? This room is mine. This record, this quiet and determined woman who is finally reclaiming her life. I whispered, "This life is mine." Outside, darkness was already falling. The wind stirred the curtains. Perfect.